Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the gritty, chaotic life of a kid in ancient Rome, where every day feels like a roll of the dice with danger, disease, and some seriously questionable parenting choices. Picture this: you're a scrawny kid, barefoot, weaving through Rome's bustling streets, dodging carts piled with fish and the occasional runaway pig. The air's thick with smoke, sweat, and the stench of open sores. You're not just surviving, you're trying to make sense of a world where gods, gladiators, and grumpy grown-ups rule everything. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this without a few scars, physical or otherwise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where you're chilling as we explore this together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into a world that's loud, raw, and unforgiving. The moment you take your first breath, you're already behind the 8 ball. Ancient Rome, whether it's 100 BCE or 200 CE, isn't exactly a kid-friendly paradise. If you're lucky, you're born in a bustling city like Rome itself, where the population swells to nearly 1 million at its peak, a mainstream historical fact that shows just how crowded and chaotic urban life was. But lucky is relative. Your first challenge? Surviving infancy. Babies in Rome face a brutal reality. Maybe 1 in 3 don't make it past their first year. Your parents might name you Quintus or Julia, but they're not getting too attached just yet. They know the odds. If you're a girl, your chances of being kept are even slimmer. Some families, especially the poorer ones, leave unwanted daughters on hillsides to expose them. Harsh, right? You're not even walking, and Rome's already rolling the dice on your life. Now, let's talk about that quirky tidbit. Your parents might rub garlic on your gums to ward off evil spirits. Yeah, ancient Romans were big on superstitions, and they thought garlic or even spitting near a baby, in this case, could keep demons at bay. No offense, but you probably smell like a market stall already. This wasn't just old wives' tales, it was serious business. Your family might also hang a bulla, a little amulet, around your neck to protect you from the evil eye. If you're thinking, wow, that's extra, just wait, it gets weirder. Your home, if you're in the city, is likely a cramped, dim insular apartment, stacked high with other families. Think of it as a rickety, ancient tenement building, where the walls are thin, the roof leaks, and fire's always a bad day away. If you're rural, you're in a mud brick hut, surrounded by fields and livestock, but don't get any pastoral vibes, this life's just as grueling. Either way, your crib's not exactly a cozy bassinet. You're swaddled in rough wool, maybe sharing a straw mattress with siblings or even a stray dog for warmth. The air's smoky from the hearth, and your mom's cooking something that smells suspiciously like boiled cabbage and fish sauce. Yum. Historians still argue whether Roman parents loved their kids the way we think of it today. Some say they were cold, treating you more like property than a person, especially if you're a girl or born to a poorer family. Others argue there's evidence of affection. Letters and tombstones show parents grieving lost children. Either way, you're not exactly being coddled. Your dad, the paterfamilias, has absolute power over the household. He decides if you're kept or exposed, and his word is law. Your mom's busy spinning wool or grinding grain, so you're often left with a wet nurse or an older sibling who's barely out of diapers themselves. If you're crying, good luck getting attention. There's always something louder, like a neighbor's argument or a cart crashing outside. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the Roman baby cry? Because even the gods couldn't fix that diaper situation. Seriously, though, diapers aren't a thing. You're wrapped in cloth, and when it's soiled, someone might rinse it in a bucket, if you're lucky. Otherwise, you're sitting in it, and that's just day one. Your parents aren't reading parenting scrolls or debating sleep training. They're too busy surviving themselves. If you're born into a wealthy family, you might have a slave to watch you, but don't get too comfy, those slaves aren't trained nannies. They're just as overworked and underfed as anyone else. Your first years are a blur of hunger, noise, and the constant threat of something going wrong. If you're in a poorer family, you're already helping out by age 3 or 4, fetching water, chasing chickens, or dodging your dad's temper. Wealthier kids aren't off the hook either. You're expected to sit quietly while some tutor drones on about Latin verbs. Playtime? That's a luxury, and Rome doesn't do luxury for kids. Your toys, if you have any, are clay rattles or wooden dolls that look like they've seen better days. One wrong move, and you're getting a switch across the legs. Discipline's no joke here. Speaking of danger, let's talk about the streets. If you're toddling around Rome, you're not exactly strolling through a park. The roads are packed with merchants, mules, and the occasional senator in a litter who doesn't care if you're in the way. You might trip over a broken amphora or step in something you'd rather not identify. And don't even think about wandering too far. Child abductions for slavery or worse aren't unheard of. Your parents might tie a cord around your wrist to keep you close, like you're a pet goat. Funny, but not haha funny, you know? Another quick joke to keep you awake: why don't Roman kids play hide and seek? Because the streets are so crowded, you'd never find each other. Back to reality, your world's a sensory overload. The marketplace screams with vendors hawking bread, olives, and garum, that fishy sauce Romans love. You're dodging stray dogs and the occasional drunk who's had too much watered-down wine. If you're near the Tiber River, the smell's enough to make your eyes water. And yet, this is home. You're learning to navigate it, toughening up fast because Rome doesn't wait for you to catch up. Your family's also got bigger problems than you. If you're born during the Republic's fall or the Empire's rise, political chaos is everywhere. Riots, assassinations, and civil wars aren't just history lessons, they're your Tuesday. Your dad might come home muttering about some new emperor or a tax hike that's got everyone on edge. You don't understand the politics, but you feel the tension. If your family's poor, you're one bad harvest away from starvation. If they're rich, you're still not safe. Political enemies might target your household. Either way, you're not exactly dreaming of a bright future. Let's toss in one more joke before we wrap this section. Why was the Roman kid's lullaby so bad? Because it was sung by a tone-deaf slave. Okay, back to you. As a newborn, you're already learning Rome's first lesson. Life's tough, and you'd better get tougher. You're surrounded by noise, smells, and people who don't have time to coddle you. Your parents might love you, but they're too busy surviving to show it. And that garlic on your gums? Yeah, it's not doing much against the chaos of this world. You're in ancient Rome, kid, and it's only going to get rougher from here. You're a bit older now, maybe 5 or 6, and you're trudging through Rome's crowded, filthy streets, where every step feels like a gamble with fate. The city's a sensory assault, think honking horns, but instead it's creaking cartwheels, shouting vendors, and the occasional bleat of a goat being dragged to market. Your bare feet slap against uneven cobblestones, slick with who knows what, and you're already learning to dodge the worst of it. Rome's urban life, a mainstream historical fact, was a sprawling mess of nearly 1 million people at its height, packed into a city with no proper sanitation or traffic rules. You're not just a kid here, you're a tiny speck in a chaotic, smelly machine. The streets are narrow, barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass, and you're weaving through a crowd of toga-clad merchants, slaves hauling amphorae, and stray dogs sniffing for scraps. The air's thick with wood smoke, sweat, and the sharp tang of garum, that fishy sauce Romans can't get enough of. You're probably wrinkling your nose, but trust me, you'll get used to it, or at least learn to breathe through your mouth. Your home's likely in an insula, one of those rickety, multi-story tenements that look like they might collapse if someone sneezes too hard. Fires are so common that you've already seen neighbors scrambling to save their belongings from a blaze. Fun fact, Romans didn't have fire brigades until Augustus, so if your building catches, you're grabbing your bulla amulet and running. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Romans believed rubbing crocodile dung on their skin worked as sunscreen. Imagine you're out in the forum, squinting in the sun, and your mom slathers you with this stuff, swearing it'll keep you from burning. You're not sure what's worse, the smell or the fact that it probably doesn't work. And yeah, you're outside a lot because your apartment's too cramped for play. Your family shares a single room, maybe 2 if you're lucky, with a straw mattress, a smoky hearth, and a bucket for, well, you know. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. You're sleeping next to your siblings, hearing every snore and argument from the neighbors above. Historians still argue whether Rome's urban density made life worse for kids than rural areas. Some say the countryside offered fresh air and space, but others point out rural kids face just as many dangers, like wild animals or backbreaking farm work. In the city, you're at least close to markets and temples, but that closeness comes with risks. You're dodging carts piled with cabbages or amphorae of wine, and if you're not quick, a careless driver might clip you. The streets aren't just roads, they're open sores. Waste flows through gutters, and if it rains, you're wading through a soup of mud and worse. You've learned to jump over the grossest puddles, but your feet are never clean. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why don't Roman kids play in the street? Because they'd get run over by a chariot before they could say vini, vidi, vici. Seriously, though, you're not exactly skipping through a playground. Your play might be tossing knucklebones, sheep ankle bones used like dice, with other kids in an alley. But even that's risky. Older kids might steal your bones or shake you down for a crust of bread. And don't wander too far. Stories of kids being snatched for the slave trade aren't just rumors. Your parents keep a sharp eye on you, or at least they try when they're not haggling over olives or praying at a shrine. Your daily trek might take you to the forum, where senators strut around like they own the place, which, to be fair, they kind of do. You're small, so you're ducking under elbows, trying not to get trampled. The forum's a mix of grandeur and grime. Marble temples gleam next to stalls selling questionable meat. You might overhear a poet reciting something lofty or a vendor yelling about fresh fish that's been sitting out since dawn. If you're lucky, your mom gave you a copper coin to buy a barley cake, but it's probably stale. Still, you munch it while watching a street performer juggle or a soothsayer mutter about omens. Everything's loud, bright, and a little scary. Another joke to keep you cozy: why did the Roman kid cross the road? To pick up his knucklebones before a mule ate them. Back to the grind. You're learning to navigate this urban jungle because you have no choice. If you're a boy, you might tag along with your dad to the baths or a shop, carrying his tools or a basket of goods. If you're a girl, you're stuck closer to home, maybe helping your mom grind grain or fetch water from a fountain. The fountain's a social hub, where women gossip and kids like you swap stories about that weird guy who swears he saw a god in the Tiber River. You're not sure if you believe him, but you're not taking chances. Remember that garlic from your baby days? Yeah, you're still a bit superstitious. The city's dangers don't end with traffic or kidnappers. Disease is everywhere, lurking in the water, the air, the food. You've seen kids your age cough and not stop, or worse, just disappear. Doctors? They're more like guessers, prescribing herbs or bleeding you with leeches. If you're sick, your mom might pray to Asclepius or smear you with some mystery paste, hopefully not that crocodile dung again. You're toughening up fast, but it's not like you have a choice. Rome's a city that chews up the weak, and you're determined not to be one of them. Nighttime's no better. Your insula's walls don't block the sounds of drunken arguments or crying babies. You curl up on your mattress, maybe clutching that bulla amulet, hoping tomorrow's a bit kinder. But deep down, you know it won't be. The city's alive, pulsing with energy, but it's not built for you. You're just a kid, dodging danger, learning to survive in a world that doesn't care if you make it. And yet, there's a spark in you. Maybe it's the thrill of dodging a cart or snagging an extra barley cake. Rome's tough, but you're tougher. You have to be. You're still a kid in ancient Rome, maybe 7 now, and you're starting to feel the weight of your family's rules pressing down on you like a heavy toga on a hot day. You're not just dodging carts and muck in the streets anymore. You're navigating a household where every move you make is watched, judged, and probably criticized. Your family structure, a mainstream historical fact, revolves around the paterfamilias, your dad, or maybe your grandpa, who holds absolute power over everyone, including you. His word isn't just law, it's practically divine. If he says you're fetching water or marrying some old guy when you're barely a teenager, you don't get a vote. Welcome to Rome, where family values feel more like a chokehold than a hug. Your home's a cramped insula or a rural hut, and it's bursting with people. Parents, siblings, maybe an aunt who never stops talking, and a couple of slaves if your family's got a bit of coin. Privacy's a myth. You're sharing a straw mattress with your little brother, who kicks in his sleep, and you can hear your parents arguing about money through the thin walls. Your mom's spinning wool or cooking something that smells like boiled lentils and despair, while your dad's out making deals or praying to the household gods. You're expected to pitch in, no matter how small you are. If you're a boy, you might carry tools or run messages. If you're a girl, you're learning to weave or grind grain, because apparently fun is for other kids in some far-off future. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman families believed wearing a tiny phallic charm, yep, you heard that right, could protect you from bad luck. So, picture you, a scrawny kid, with this awkward amulet dangling around your neck, probably getting teased by your cousins. Your mom swears it keeps the evil eye away, but you're just trying not to blush when someone points it out. Superstitions like this are everywhere, and your family's got a shrine to the lares, those household spirits, where you're expected to toss a pinch of grain or wine daily. Forget to do it? You're half convinced the gods will zap you with a stomachache. Historians still argue whether Roman families were truly affectionate or just functional units designed to keep society running. Some point to gravestones with sweet inscriptions about beloved kids, suggesting real love. Others say parents saw you as future workers or bargaining chips for alliances. Either way, you're not exactly swimming in warm fuzzes. Your dad's authority is ironclad. He can even sell you into slavery if he's desperate enough, though that's rare. Your mom's got some sway, but only behind closed doors, and she's too busy to coddle you. If you've got siblings, you're either fighting over the last scrap of bread or teaming up to avoid a scolding. Discipline's no joke. One wrong move, like spilling the water you spent an hour fetching, and you're getting a smack or a long lecture about honor. Let's toss in a joke to keep things light. Why did the Roman kid dread family dinners? Because the only thing spicier than the food was dad's temper. Seriously, meals are a tense affair. You're sitting on a wobbly stool, eating barley porridge or maybe some lentils if it's a good day. If your family's wealthy, you might get a taste of dormouse roasted with herbs. Sounds fancy, tastes like regret. You're expected to eat fast and shut up, especially if your dad's got guests. Kids don't get to chatter at the table. You're seen, not heard, unless you're reciting some Latin phrase to impress a visitor. Your role in the family depends on your status. If you're the eldest son, you're the golden child, destined to inherit and carry on the family name. You're already trailing your dad, learning his trade or how to swagger like a proper Roman. If you're a younger son or a daughter, tough luck, you're basically an extra mouth to feed. Girls have it worse. You're groomed for marriage from, like, age 10, learning to spin wool or manage a household while your brother gets to dream of being a soldier. And if you're born to a freedman or slave, you're working harder than anyone, maybe cleaning pots or running errands, with no hope of climbing the social ladder. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids rebel? Because dad's got a stick and the gods are watching. Back to reality, your family's obsessed with honor and tradition. You're taught to respect ancestors, whose creepy wax masks stare at you from the family shrine. Every festival, like Saturnalia, means extra chores, cleaning, offering food to the gods, or worse, sitting still while your dad drones on about family glory. You're starting to notice how unfair it all is. Your older sister's betrothed to some guy twice her age, and your brother gets praised for just existing. You're just trying to avoid a lecture about upholding the family name. The pressure's not just from your parents. Grandparents, if they're around, are always muttering about how kids these days, meaning you, lack discipline. Aunts and uncles chime in, too, especially if they're childless and think they know better. You're caught in a web of expectations, and nobody's asking what you want. If you're lucky, you've got a sibling who's your ally, sneaking you an extra fig or covering for you when you sneak out to watch street performers. But even that's risky. Get caught, and you're both in trouble. Your family's a team, sure, but it feels more like a squad where everyone's shouting orders. The worst part? You're powerless. You can't argue back or say no without risking a beating or worse, being disowned. Your dad could legally kick you out, though most don't go that far. Still, the threat's always there, hanging over you like the smoke from the hearth. You're learning to keep your head down, do your chores, and pray the gods don't notice you slacking. Speaking of gods, your family's always dragging you to rituals, slaughtering a chicken or burning incense to keep Jupiter happy. You're not sure if you believe it all, but you're not about to test the gods' patience. That phallic charm's starting to feel like your only friend. One last joke before we move on. Why was the Roman kid's family so loud? Because even the gods couldn't get a word in. As you curl up on your lumpy mattress, listening to the city's hum through the walls, you're starting to realize your family's both your safety net and your cage. You love them, sure, but you're also itching for a bit of freedom. Too bad Rome doesn't care what a kid wants. You're stuck in this suffocating web of rules, chores, and expectations, and there's no escape in sight. You're trudging to school now, a skinny kid of 8 or 9, clutching a wax tablet and stylus, your stomach growling because breakfast was just a scrap of stale bread. School in ancient Rome isn't the fun, colorful classroom you might imagine. It's a gauntlet of strict teachers, endless memorization, and a stick ready to whack you if you mess up. Education, a mainstream historical fact, was a privilege mostly for boys of wealthier families, though some girls and poorer kids got a basic version if they were lucky. But don't get excited, lucky here means hours of reciting Latin poetry until your brain feels like it's leaking out your ears. You're not learning for fun, you're being molded into a proper Roman, and it's about as cozy as a stone bench in January. Your school's not a fancy building. It's a rented shopfront or a corner of someone's house, open to the street so passers-by can hear your mistakes and laugh. You're sitting on a hard stool, squinting at your tablet in the dim light of an oil lamp. Your teacher, the Ludi Magister, is a grizzled guy who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. He's got a cane or a leather strap, and he's not shy about using it. Forget to conjugate a verb? Thwack. Mispronounce Homer? Thwack. You're learning fast that silence is safer than a wrong answer. The curriculum's brutal: reading, writing, arithmetic, and endless lines of Virgil or Cicero. You're memorizing speeches by heart, and if you stumble, the whole class gets to watch you squirm. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman teachers use sweetened bread to bribe kids into reciting correctly. Basically, the ancient version of a gold star, but tastier. Imagine you're struggling through a line of poetry, your tongue tripping over Latin, and your teacher dangles a crumbly honeycake in front of you. It's the only thing keeping you going, because the alternative is a stinging palm or a long lecture about Roman virtue. You're not sure which is worse. Your classmates, a mix of toga-wearing brats and scruffy kids like you, aren't much help. They're either snickering at your mistakes or whispering their own answers, hoping to avoid the teacher's glare. Historians still argue whether Roman education was effective or just glorified hazing. Some say it produced sharp minds who could argue law or lead armies. Others think it crushed creativity with its focus on rote learning and discipline. Either way, you're feeling the crush. If you're a girl, your schooling's probably at home, learning to read and write just enough to manage a household. Boys get the full grind, grammar, rhetoric, maybe even Greek if your family's fancy. You're expected to recite long passages perfectly, and your teacher's favorite phrase is repeat. Repeat. Your fingers ache from scratching letters into wax, and your head spinning from declensions. School starts at dawn, so you're up before the roosters, stumbling through Rome's dark streets to get there. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the Roman kid hate school? Because the only break was when the cane broke. Back to your day, you're not just fighting boredom, you're dodging physical punishment. Teachers believe pain sharpens the mind, so a quick smack is their go-to fix for laziness. You've seen kids with welts on their hands, and you're trying hard not to join them. Your tablet's a mess of scratched-out mistakes, and your stylus feels like it's glued to your hand. If you're lucky, you get a moment to scribble a rude word in the wax before smoothing it out, your tiny rebellion against the system. The worst part? School's not even guaranteed. If your family's poor, you might only get a year or two before you're pulled out to work. Wealthier kids get tutors or fancy rhetoricians, but you're stuck with grumpy old Lucius who smells like garlic and wine. You're learning to read from scrolls of epic poetry, but it's not like you're diving into adventure stories. It's all about duty, honor, and how great Rome is. You're starting to wonder if anyone cares what you think. Spoiler, they don't. Your job is to absorb, repeat, and stay out of trouble. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the Roman classroom so quiet? Because everyone was too scared to sneeze. Seriously, the tension's real. You're competing with other kids, not for grades but for approval. A good recitation might earn you that honeycake or a rare nod from your teacher, but a bad one means public humiliation. You're also dodging the class bully, some rich kid who thinks he's Julius Caesar reincarnated. He's always ready to trip you or steal your stylus, and the teacher barely notices unless you make a fuss, then you're both in trouble. If you're a girl, your school is your mom or a slave teaching you to spin wool or manage accounts. You're memorizing recipes, not poetry, and your lessons are about being a proper Roman wife. It's not fair, and you know it, but complaining gets you nowhere. Boys aren't having a picnic either. By age 12, you're prepping for public speaking or military training, no matter how much you'd rather be tossing knucklebones in the street. School's supposed to make you a citizen, but it feels like it's breaking you instead. You're also dealing with the chaos of getting to school. Rome's streets are a nightmare at dawn, merchants shouting, mules braying, and the ever-present stink of sewage. You're dodging puddles and stray dogs, your tablet tucked under your arm, praying you don't drop it in the muck. If you're late, you're not just scolded, you're caned. Your parents don't care about your excuses, they expect you to tough it out. You're learning to hate the sound of your teacher's voice, but you're also starting to memorize lines that stick with you, like bits of Virgil about heroes and gods. It's boring, sure, but there's a tiny part of you that feels proud when you get it right. One last joke before we wrap this up. Why did the Roman kid bring a ladder to school? He was hoping to escape over the wall. As you stumble home, your hand stinging from a stray whack and your brain stuffed with Latin, you're dreaming of a day when you're not under someone's thumb. School's supposed to prepare you for life, but it's mostly teaching you to endure. You're tougher now, sharper, but you're also tired. Rome's molding you into something, maybe a scholar, maybe a soldier, but right now, you just want a nap and that honeycake you didn't earn. You're a kid in ancient Rome, probably 9 or 10 now, and instead of kicking a ball around or building forts, you're hauling water, scrubbing pots, or learning a trade that makes your hands ache. Playtime's a distant dream. Rome expects you to pull your weight, and the weight's heavy. A mainstream historical fact: most Roman children, especially from poorer families, were put to work as soon as they could walk steadily, often by age 7 or 8. You're not a carefree kid, you're a tiny cog in Rome's relentless machine, whether you're sweeping floors in a baker's shop or chasing goats on a dusty farm. Fun? That's for babies and senators' kids, and even they don't get much. If you're in the city, your day starts before dawn. You're up, bleary-eyed, while the stars are still out, helping your mom grind grain or lugging baskets to the market. The streets are already humming, vendors yelling about olives, carts rattling, and that ever-present stench of fish sauce and sweat. Your family's poor, so you're running errands, delivering messages, or sweeping the shop where your dad sells cheap pottery. If you're rural, it's worse. You're out in the fields, herding sheep, picking olives, or hauling manure under a sun that feels like it's personally mad at you. Your hands are calloused, your tunic's filthy, and you're dreaming of a nap you won't get. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman kids were sent to learn by watching executions or gladiator fights, supposedly to toughen them up. Imagine your dad dragging you to the Colosseum, saying, "Watch how that guy handles a sword, kid," while you're just trying not to puke at the sight of blood. It's not exactly a field trip to the zoo. Your parents think work and exposure to Rome's harsh realities will make you strong, but you're mostly just tired and a little traumatized. If you're lucky, you get a moment to toss knucklebones with other kids, but even that's interrupted by a shout to get back to work. Historians still argue whether Roman kids had any real childhood or were just mini-adults in training. Some say the lack of play built resilience, others think it robbed you of creativity and joy. Either way, you're not debating philosophy, you're too busy dodging your dad's temper or your mom's orders. If you're a boy, you might be apprenticed to a baker, blacksmith, or sandal maker, learning by watching and getting yelled at. If you're a girl, you're stuck at home, spinning wool until your fingers cramp or learning to cook dishes you can't afford to eat. Wealthier kids aren't off the hook, they're shadowing their dads at the forum or memorizing speeches, which sounds fancy but feels like a prison sentence. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why don't Roman kids play tag? Because they're too busy running from chores. Back to your reality, work isn't just hard, it's dangerous. In the city, you're dodging falling tiles from crumbling insulae or navigating workshops where hot forges and sharp tools are one misstep away from disaster. Out in the country, you're fending off snakes, wild dogs, or the occasional angry boar. You've heard stories of kids getting crushed by carts or burned in shop fires, and you're learning to move fast and stay alert. Your parents don't coddle you, they can't afford to. If you slack off, it's not just a scolding, it's less food on the table. Your only break might be a quick game with other working kids. You're tossing those knucklebones or maybe kicking a leather ball stuffed with rags, but it's not exactly recess. Someone's always shouting for you to hurry up, and if you're caught slacking, you're getting a smack or a lecture about family honor. If you're a slave kid, and yeah, that's a real possibility, you're working twice as hard, maybe cleaning latrines or hauling water for a rich household. No one's asking if you're okay, they're asking if the job's done. You're learning to keep your head down and your hands moving. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the Roman kid's job so bad? Because even the goats had better hours. Seriously, though, you're starting to resent how little your work matters. You're not saving for a new tunic or a trip to the boss, you're just helping your family scrape by. If you're in a trade, you're mimicking your dad's every move, whether it's kneading dough or hammering leather. Mistakes aren't tolerated, you're expected to get it right or face the consequences. Your dad's not a teacher, he's a taskmaster, and his patience is thinner than the porridge you ate this morning. If you're a girl, your work is prep for marriage, which feels like a job in itself. You're weaving, cooking, or learning to manage slaves, even though your family might not own any. Your mom's always watching, correcting your stitches or scolding you for burning the lentils. You're not sure what's worse, the monotony or the fact that this is your life's big plan. Boys get it rough too, but at least they might dream of being a soldier or a senator. You're just hoping your future husband isn't a total jerk. Either way, work's your world now, and play's a luxury you can't afford. The physical toll's no joke. Your back aches from carrying water jars, your hands are raw from scrubbing, and you're always one bad cut away from an infection. Doctors aren't exactly rushing to help poor kids, and your mom's remedies, herbs or that weird crocodile dung paste you remember from earlier, are more hope than science. You're toughening up, but it's not like you had a choice. Rome's a grind, and you're learning that survival means work, not whining. You steal moments of joy, a quick laugh with a friend, a stray fig snatched from a market stall, but they're fleeting. One last joke before we move on. Why did the Roman kid quit his job? He didn't, he wasn't allowed to. As you collapse onto your straw mattress, your muscles sore and your tunic stiff with dirt, you're dreaming of a day when you can just be a kid. But Rome doesn't work that way. You're a worker now, not a dreamer, and the city's got no patience for your childhood. You're learning to push through, to keep going, because that's what Romans do. And tomorrow? It's just more of the same. You're trudging through another day in ancient Rome, maybe 10 years old now, and your stomach's growling louder than the mules in the market. Hunger's your constant companion, a nagging ache that follows you like a stray dog. Food in Rome, a mainstream historical fact, was scarce for the poor, who made up most of the population, and kids like you often got the short end of the loaf. You're not dreaming of feasts or even a decent meal, just something to quiet the rumble in your gut. Whether you're in a cramped insula or a rural hut, eating's a gamble, and the odds aren't in your favor. Your family's poor, so your diet's mostly barley porridge, maybe some lentils or cabbage if the harvest was good. Bread's a staple, but it's coarse, gritty, and sometimes studded with bits of stone from the mill. Hope you don't crack a tooth. If you're lucky, you get a smear of olive oil or a drizzle of garum, that fishy sauce Romans love but you're starting to hate. Meat? That's for festivals or rich people. You might snag a scrap of pork or a bony fish on a good day, but most of the time, you're chewing tough greens and praying they don't make you sick. Your mom's cooking over a smoky hearth, and the pot's always too small for the family. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes ate dormice, fattened in clay jars like tiny, creepy livestock. Imagine your uncle showing up with a treat, a roasted dormouse, its little eyes staring at you. You're supposed to be grateful, but you're just wondering if it's too late to trade it for more porridge. Food's not just about taste, it's about status. Rich kids get honeyed cakes and exotic fruits, while you're scrounging for bruised figs or crusts left in the market. If you're really desperate, you might sneak a handful of grain from a sack, but get caught, and you're in for a beating. Historians still argue whether hunger shaped Roman kids' lives more than disease or work. Some say malnutrition stunted growth and weakened immune systems. Others think kids adapted, scraping by on sheer grit. Either way, you're feeling it. You're smaller than you should be, your ribs a bit too visible, and you're always tired. Meals are a scramble, your siblings fight over the last spoonful, and if your dad's in a bad mood, he gets first pick. You're learning to eat fast or go hungry. If you're in the countryside, you might forage for wild herbs or berries, but that's risky. One wrong plant, and you're puking for days. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the Roman kid hide his bread? Because his brother's faster at stealing than a chariot. Back to your day, food's not just scarce, it's dodgy. Water from the public fountain tastes like metal, and nobody's boiling it to kill germs. Milk's rare and often sour, so you're drinking weak wine mixed with water, if you're lucky. Spoilage is a constant threat. That fish you ate yesterday might have you doubled over today. Your mom tries to stretch every scrap, mixing old bread into porridge or tossing wilted greens into a stew. You're grateful, but it's hard to feel thankful when your stomach's still complaining. Market trips are your one shot at variety, but they're a tease. You're weaving through stalls, dodging merchants shouting about fresh olives that look like they've seen better days. The smell of baked bread makes your mouth water, but a loaf costs more than your family can spare. Sometimes you linger near a fruit stall, hoping a vendor drops a peach or a kid like you shares a stolen grape. If you're really bold, you might nick a crust from a distracted baker, but that's a gamble. Thieves get harsh punishments, even kids. You've seen boys your age whipped for less, and you're not keen to join them. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids trust cooks? Because the surprise in the stew is usually yesterday's garbage. Seriously, though, food's a source of stress. If your family's rural, you're helping with the harvest, which sounds nice until you're pulling weeds under a blazing sun or fighting off birds to save the grain. A bad harvest means everyone's hungry, and you're the last to eat. In the city, you're dependent on grain handouts from the state, but those are for citizens, and if your family's not on the list, tough luck. You've heard of kids fainting from hunger, and you're determined not to be one of them. The worst part? You're surrounded by food you can't have. Wealthy Romans throw lavish feasts with peacocks, oysters, and cakes dripping with honey, while you're chewing on a lump of bread that's more gravel than grain. You pass by taverns where men laugh over plates of roasted meat, and your stomach twists. If you're a slave kid, you might serve at one of these feasts, carrying platters of food you'll never taste. You're learning to ignore the hunger, to focus on your chores, but it's always there, gnawing at you like a rat in the walls. You're also dodging scams. Some vendors sell meat that's probably dog or worse, and you've learned to sniff suspiciously at anything too cheap. Your mom's got a knack for spotting bad deals, but even she gets fooled sometimes. Once, you ate some fish that had you all sick for days, and your dad swore he'd never trust that vendor again. You're starting to see food as a battlefield. Every bite's a victory, every missed meal a defeat. You're tough, but hunger's tougher, and it's teaching you to be quick, clever, and maybe a little sneaky. One last joke before we move on. Why was the Roman kid's lunch so sad? Because it was just a bowl of wishful thinking. As you huddle on your straw mattress, your belly half full and your hands still gritty from the day's work, you're dreaming of a world where food's not a fight. But Rome doesn't care about your dreams. You're learning to savor the small wins, a stolen fig, a rare taste of honey, a moment when the hunger fades. Tomorrow's another day of scraping by, but you're getting good at it. You have to. You're scampering through Rome's crowded streets, a wiry 10-year-old, dodging carts and trying not to breathe too deeply because the air's thick with the stench of sweat, smoke, and something suspiciously like rotting fish. Your biggest worry today isn't chores or hunger, it's staying alive in a city crawling with diseases that could knock you flat before you even know what hit you. A mainstream historical fact, ancient Rome's urban centers were breeding grounds for illness, with poor sanitation and packed living conditions making outbreaks of plague, malaria, or dysentery terrifyingly common. You're not just a kid, you're a target for every germ floating in the Tiber's murky water or lurking in the marketplace slop. Your home, that cramped insular or drafty hut, is no safe haven. The walls are damp, the air's smoky from the hearth, and your family sharing a single latrine bucket, if you're lucky. Public latrines are worse, open stone benches where you sit elbow to elbow with strangers, no flushing, just a trickle of water that doesn't do much for the smell. You've learned to hold your breath and move fast. Water's another problem. You're hauling it from a public fountain, but it's often cloudy, tasting of lead from the pipes or worse from upstream waste. Nobody's boiling it, so every sip's a roll of the dice. You've seen kids your age doubled over, clutching their stomachs, and you're praying that's not you tomorrow. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes wore amulets shaped like tiny hands to ward off disease, believing they could flick away bad spirits. Picture you, clutching your bulla and now this weird hand charm, hoping it'll keep the fever at bay while your mom mutters prayers to Asclepius. It's not exactly reassuring when she's also smearing you with some herbal paste that smells like old socks. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Yeah, it's that kind of logic. Superstitions are your family's best defense, because doctors are more like gamblers than healers, prescribing bizarre cures like drinking gladiator blood or sleeping next to a sacred snake. You're sticking with the amulet, thanks. Historians still argue whether Rome's high child mortality was due more to disease or malnutrition. Some say germs were the bigger killer, thriving in the city's filth. Others argue hunger weakened kids like you, making you easy prey for any bug. Either way, you're feeling the risk. You're small for your age, your cough's been lingering, and you've noticed how fast neighbors' kids disappear when fever gets whispered. Your parents don't talk about it, but you see the worry in their eyes when you sneeze. If you're in the countryside, it's not much better. Stagnant ponds breed malaria, and you're dodging mosquitoes while you herd goats or pick olives. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman kid avoid the doctor? Because his cures were scarier than the disease. Back to your day, you're trying to stay healthy, but Rome's not making it easy. Bathhouses sound nice, big, steamy pools where everyone soaks, but they're also germ central. You're splashing in water that's been used by a dozen sweaty merchants, and nobody's cleaning it properly. If your family can't afford the baths, you're washing in a basin with water you hold yourself, which is probably just as dodgy. Your tunic's stiff with dirt, and your hair's a nest of dust and lice. You're itching, but scratching just makes it worse. Disease isn't the only hazard. Injuries are everywhere. You're running through streets littered with broken pottery, stray nails, or slick patches of who knows what. Trip, and you're nursing a gash that could fester in a heartbeat. You've seen kids with swollen cuts, limping around until they just stop showing up. If you're working, it's worse. Sharp tools, hot forges, or heavy loads mean one wrong move could break a bone or worse. Your mom's got her herbal poultices, but they're more hope than help. If you're really sick, your family might drag you to a temple, leaving offerings for the gods, but you're not holding your breath for a miracle. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the Roman kid's cough so bad? Because even the gods couldn't clear that air. Seriously, though, you're learning to fear the invisible. A friend's fever, a neighbor's sudden absence, the way your mom checks your forehead when she thinks you're not looking, it's all a reminder that health's a luxury. You're dodging open sores, trying not to touch the slimy walls of the fountain, but it's like the city's out to get you. If you're a slave kid, it's even grimmer. You're working in close quarters, maybe cleaning latrines or serving food, with no time to rest if you're sick. The worst part is the uncertainty. You don't know what's safe. That apple from the market could be fine or could have you vomiting by nightfall. The water you drank might be clean or might be why your sister's been in bed for days. Your parents pray, sacrifice, and hang more charms around your neck, but you're starting to wonder if the gods are even listening. You're tough, you have to be, but every cough or ache feels like a warning. You're not just fighting to survive the streets or your chores, you're fighting enemies you can't see, and they're everywhere. You're also learning to spot the signs. A rashy kid in the market? You steer clear. A foul smell from the water jar? You skip it, even if you're thirsty. Your family's got rituals, sprinkling salt, burning herbs, to keep the bad air away, but you're not sure it's working. You've heard of plagues sweeping through Rome, taking whole families, and the thought keeps you up at night, curled on your lumpy mattress. You're small, but you're not stupid, you know the odds aren't great. One last joke before we move on. Why did the Roman kid wear so many amulets? He was hoping to charm the germs away. As you huddle under your thin blanket, the city's noises filtering through the walls, shouts, cartwheels, a distant cough, you're clutching that hand-shaped charm, whispering your own prayers. You're tougher than you look, but Rome's a city that doesn't care if you make it. Disease is just another hurdle, and you're learning to leap it, one wary step at a time. You're 10 or 11 now, scurrying through Rome's noisy streets, but today you're not just dodging carts or hunger, you're tiptoeing around a world ruled by gods and superstitions that feel like they're watching your every move. Religion in ancient Rome, a mainstream historical fact, was woven into daily life, with rituals and offerings shaping everything from meals to major decisions. As a kid, you're not just a bystander, you're roped into these spooky, strict ceremonies, expected to pray, sprinkle grain, or even slaughter a chicken to keep the gods happy. Mess up, and you're half convinced Jupiter's going to zap you with a lightning bolt. It's less about faith and more about survival in a city obsessed with divine approval. Your family's got a little shrine at home, a niche with statuettes of the Lares, those household spirits, and maybe a creepy wax mask of your great-grandpa staring down at you. Every morning, you're tossing a pinch of flour or a splash of wine onto the altar, muttering prayers you barely understand. If you forget, your mom's quick to scold, warning that the gods'll curse the whole family. You're not sure if you believe her, but you're not testing it. Remember that garlic rubbed on your gums phase from when you were a baby? Yeah, your family's still all in on warding off bad vibes. Outside, the city's packed with temples, from Jupiter's grand hilltop shrine to tiny street altars where you leave a crust of bread for some minor deity. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes sacrificed dogs to appease the gods during the Robigalia festival, believing it'd protect crops from disease. Picture you, dragged along to watch a priest slit a puppy's throat, your stomach churning while your dad nods like it's no big deal. You're supposed to feel on it, but you're mostly just glad it wasn't your stray mutt from the alley. Superstitions are everywhere, spitting to ward off the evil eye, avoiding black cats, or wearing that phallic charm you got teased about earlier. You're starting to think half of Rome's rules are just grown-ups making stuff up to scare you into behaving. Historians still argue whether kids like you genuinely believed in these rituals or just went through the motions to avoid trouble. Some say religion gave Romans a sense of control in a chaotic world. Others think it was a tool to keep everyone, especially kids, in line. Either way, you're stuck in the middle. If you're a boy, you might be forced to stand through long ceremonies at the Temple of Mars, sweating in your too big tunic while priests drone on. If you're a girl, you're helping your mom prepare offerings, kneading dough for sacred cakes or weaving garlands for Vesta's altar. It's boring, but skipping out isn't an option. The gods, or at least your parents, are always watching. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman kid pray so loud? He didn't want Jupiter to miss his name. Back to your reality, these rituals aren't just at home. You're dragged to festivals like Lupercalia, where half-naked priests run around whipping people with goat hides for good luck. You're dodging their swings, wondering who decided this was a great idea. Or there's Saturnalia, where everyone's supposed to be merry, but you're stuck cleaning up after the feast while adults get drunk on watered-down wine. You're learning fast that religion's less about warm fuzzes and more about following rules nobody explains. The scariest part is the omens. A crow flies left? Bad news. Your dad spills wine at dinner? The gods are mad. You're starting to see signs in everything, a creaky door, a weird dream, and it's freaking you out. Your mom's always muttering about soothsayers, who read entrails like they're today's news. Once, you saw one poke through a sheep's guts, declaring the harvest would fail. Now you're worried every time you eat a scrap of bread. If you're a slave kid, it's worse, you're hauling offerings to temples or cleaning up after sacrifices, with no say in whether you believe. You're just hoping nobody blames you for a bad omen. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids sleep through rituals? Because the gods send nightmares as reminders. Seriously, though, you're surrounded by divine drama. Your family takes you to oracles, where priests or creepy old women spout cryptic warnings. You're not sure what beware the Ides means, but it sounds bad, so you nod and try not to trip over your own feet. Public sacrifices are the worst, crowds cheering as a bull's throat is cut, blood pooling while you try not to gag. Your dad says it's for Rome's glory, but you're just wishing you could go play knucklebones instead. The pressure's real. You're taught that one wrong move, like dropping an offering or sneezing during a prayer, could anger the gods and ruin everything. Your parents are paranoid, checking the sky for weird clouds or listening for thunder. If you're in a wealthier family, you might visit a grand temple, leaving silver coins or a fancy statuette. Poor? You're stuck with a handful of grain or a wilted flower, hoping it's enough. You're starting to wonder if the gods care as much as everyone says, but you're not dumb enough to say it out loud. Blasphemy's a quick way to get disowned or worse. You're also dodging weird taboos. Don't step over a threshold with your left foot. Don't touch a sacred fire. Don't even think about laughing near a temple. It's exhausting, and you're not even sure why half these rules exist. Your only escape is the rare moment when you sneak off with other kids, whispering ghost stories about angry spirits or cursed houses. You're scaring each other silly, but it's the one time you feel like a kid, not a mini-priest. Even then, you're glancing over your shoulder, half expecting a god or your mom to catch you. One last joke before we move on. Why was the Roman kid's prayer so short? He ran out of grain to offer. As you curl up on your straw mattress, the flicker of the half-casting shadows that look a little too much like gods, you're clutching your bulla and that hand charm from earlier, whispering one last prayer. Rome's gods are everywhere, demanding, watching, judging. You're just a kid, trying to keep them happy while staying out of trouble. But in a city this superstitious, trouble's always one bad omen away. You're 11 now, darting through Rome's chaotic streets, but no matter how fast you move, you're invisible in the grand scheme of things. As a kid in ancient Rome, you have no voice, no power, and definitely no say in the adult-driven world that runs everything. A mainstream historical fact: Roman society was rigidly hierarchical, with children, especially those not yet in their teens, sitting at the bottom, below even slaves in some cases. You're not a person with rights, you're property, expected to obey, work, and stay out of the way while grown-ups make all the decisions. It's like being a ghost in your own life, and the feeling starting to grate. Your family's ruled by your dad, the paterfamilias, whose word is law, think dictator, but with a toga and a bad temper. If he says you're working in the market instead of playing, you're working. If he decides you're marrying some creepy old merchant when you're barely 12, you're packing your bags. Your mom's got no official power, though she might sneak in a word or two behind closed doors. Your opinion's about as useful as a broken amphora. You try talking back once, and the sting of a switch or a lecture about family honor reminds you to keep your mouth shut. It's not just home. Society sees you as a half-formed thing, not worth listening to until you're old enough to wear a proper toga or spin wool like a pro. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes named their kids Numerius or Sexta based on birth order, like you're just a number in a lineup. Imagine your parents calling you fifth because you're the fifth kid. Talk about feeling like a spare part. You're stuck with a name like that, or maybe just Gaius, while your bulla amulet's the only thing making you feel special. But even that's more about warding off spirits than giving you any real status. You're starting to notice how adults, whether it's your dad, a shopkeeper, or some senator strutting through the forum, brush you off like you're a stray dog begging for scraps. Historians still argue whether Roman kids like you were completely powerless or had subtle ways to influence their families. Some say you were just cogs in the machine, raised to serve Rome's glory. Others think clever kids could manipulate parents with tears or charm. Good luck with that, though. Your dad's not falling for puppy eyes when he's stressed about taxes or a bad harvest. If you're a boy, you're being groomed to maybe, someday, have a voice, but only if you survive to adulthood and prove yourself. Girls? You're prepped for marriage, which just trades one boss, your dad, for another, your husband. Either way, you're not calling the shots. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why don't Roman kids talk back? Because their dads have sticks and zero chill. Back to your reality. You're learning to navigate this powerlessness by keeping your head down. At home, you're fetching water, sweeping floors, or trailing your dad to learn his trade, all while biting your tongue. In the streets, you're dodging adults who don't care if they knock you over. Merchants, soldiers, even priests who think kids are just in the way. You've tried asking questions, like why you can't go to the baths alone or keep a coin from your errands, but the answer's always because I said so. It's maddening, but complaining just gets you more chores. If you're a slave kid, it's worse. You're not just voiceless, you're invisible unless someone needs a tray carried or a floor scrubbed. You might overhear rich folks debating politics or planning marriages, but your thoughts? Nobody cares. Free or slave, you're starting to see how Rome works. Adults have power, and kids get orders. Even at festivals like Saturnalia, where everyone's supposed to loosen up, you're still the one cleaning up spilled wine while grown-ups laugh. You're allowed to watch the fun, maybe sneak a fig, but don't you dare speak out of turn. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the Roman kid so quiet? He knew silence was his only superpower. Seriously, though, you're finding small ways to cope. You whisper complaints to your siblings, who nod because they get it. You might sneak a moment to carve a rude word into a wax tablet, giggling before smoothing it out. These tiny rebellions feel like victories, but they are fleeting. The real fight is staying out of trouble while adults make choices that shape your life: where you work, who you marry, even if you get to eat tonight. You're starting to resent it, but resentment's a luxury you can't afford. The worst part is feeling like you don't matter. You see your older brother get praise for reciting Cicero, while you're ignored for hauling water all day. If you're a girl, your mom's already talking about betrothals, like your life's just a deal to be made. You want to scream, "What about me?" but you know it'll just earn you a smack. Even the gods don't seem to care. Your prayers at the family shrine feel like shouting into the void. You're clutching that bulla, hoping it'll protect you, but deep down, you're wondering if anyone's listening at all. You're also noticing the bigger world. In the forum, men shout about wars, taxes, or some new emperor, and you're just a speck in the crowd. You've heard stories of kids being sold or abandoned when families fall on hard times, and it scares you. Your dad's got that power, though he hasn't used it yet. You're learning to read his moods, to know when to disappear before he takes his stress out on you. It's not just your family, it's Rome itself. The city's built for senators, soldiers, and gods, not for kids who just want to say. One last joke before we move on: why did the Roman kid dream of growing up? So he could finally tell someone no. As you curl up on your straw mattress, the city's hum seeping through the walls, you're clutching that number name of yours, feeling smaller than ever. You're tough, you're scrappy, but you're also trapped in a world where your voice doesn't count. You're learning to survive by being invisible, but a tiny part of you, a spark Rome hasn't crushed, wants to be heard. For now, though, you're just another kid, waiting for a chance that might never come. You're 11 or 12 now, darting through Rome's grimy alleys, desperate for a moment to act like a kid, but playtime in this city is less about fun and more about flirting with danger. You're not kicking a ball in a park or climbing trees, you're tossing knucklebones in a dusty corner or racing through crowded streets, where one wrong step could land you under a cart or worse. A mainstream historical fact: Roman children's games, like harpastum, a rough ball game, or knucklebones, were often physical and risky, mimicking the violence and competition of adult life. Your idea of play comes with scrapes, bruises, and the constant threat of something going horribly wrong. Picture you in an alley with a handful of other kids, tossing those sheep-bone dice, betting bits of bread or a shiny pebble. The game's simple: roll, score, gloat, but the stakes feel high when your older brother's lurking, ready to swipe your winnings. Or maybe you're playing Trigon, kicking a leather ball stuffed with rags, dodging elbows as other kids tackle you like they're auditioning for the Colosseum. These games aren't just for laughs, they're training you to be tough, quick, and maybe a little ruthless. You're laughing, sure, but you're also keeping one eye on the street for stray dogs or angry shopkeepers who'll chase you off with a broom. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Roman kids played with toy chariots made of clay, reenacting races from the Circus Maximus, complete with fake crashes and dramatic wipeouts. Imagine you, pushing a lopsided clay cart, yelling "Hiya!" like you're a charioteer, only to have it break and earn you a scolding for wasting time. You're dreaming of glory, but your toys are cheap, wooden dolls with creepy painted faces or rattles that sound like they're mocking you. If you're poor, you're making do with sticks and stones, inventing games that don't need much but still get you in trouble if you're caught slacking. Historians still argue whether these games gave kids like you a real break or just prepared you for Rome's brutal adult world. Some say play taught survival skills, speed, strategy, grit. Others think it was a rare chance to feel free in a society that chained you to chores and expectations. Either way, you're not thinking about history, you're just trying to have fun without breaking a leg. If you're in the city, your playground's a maze of narrow streets and open sewers. You might climb a pile of broken amphorae, pretending it's a mountain, only to slip and gash your knee. Rural kids aren't safer, you're wrestling with friends in a field, dodging thorns or the occasional angry goat. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why was the Roman kid bad at knucklebones? Because he kept eating the dice thinking they were bread. Back to your day, play's not just risky, it's interrupted. You're mid-game when your mom shouts for you to fetch water or your dad drags you to watch a gladiator fight to learn courage. That's the thing about Rome, every moment of joy comes with a catch. You're running through the forum, chasing a ball, when a merchant's cart nearly flattens you. Or you're playing near the Tiber, splashing in shallow water, only to realize it's not exactly clean. You've got a cut on your foot now, and you're praying it doesn't fester like that kid you knew who disappeared last month. If you're a girl, play's even harder to come by. You're stuck practicing weaving or helping with chores, and your games are often just mimicking adult tasks, pretending to cook or manage a household with a rag doll. Boys get more leeway, roughhousing or play fighting with sticks, but even they're watched. Slack off too long, and you're getting a smack or a lecture about Roman virtue. If you're a slave kid, forget it. Your play is whatever you can sneak while scrubbing floors or hauling firewood. You might toss a pebble with another slave kid, but one glare from your master, and it's back to work. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids play hide and seek? Because the streets are so crowded, you'd be lost forever. Seriously, though, injuries are a real worry. You've seen kids limp away from games with twisted ankles or bloody noses. Harpastum's no joke, it's like rugby with no rules, and you're tackling on stone or dirt. You've got bruises that make sitting on your school stool torture, but you're not complaining, whining's for babies, and you're proving you're tougher than that. Still, you're careful, because a broken bone could mean no work, no food, and a long, painful recovery with only your mom's herbal mush to help. The streets are your arena, but they're not safe. You're dodging drunkards, stray animals, and the occasional thief who might grab your bulla if it looks valuable. You've heard stories of kids vanishing, snatched for the slave trade or worse, so you stick close to your friends. Play's also a way to blow off steam. You're frustrated, powerless, and tired of adults' rules. Smacking a ball or wrestling a friend feels good, like you're fighting back against Rome itself. But even that's fleeting. The sun's dropping, and your mom's voice is calling you back to reality. You're starting to notice how play mirrors the grown-up world. Your games are about winning, surviving, outsmarting, just like the adults in the Forum or the Colosseum. You're not sure if you love it or hate it, but it's all you've got. On a good day, you steal a moment to laugh, to feel like a kid, but it's never long enough. You're back to chores or dodging danger before you know it, your clay chariot or knucklebones tucked away, maybe broken, maybe lost. One last joke before we move on. Why did the Roman kid's game always end? Because his mom's yell was louder than a lion's roar. As you slump onto your straw mattress, your knees scabbed and your hands gritty from the day's games, you're clutching the memory of that one perfect moment when you scored a point or laughed with a friend. Play's dangerous, fleeting, and rare, but it's yours. In a city that demands you grow up fast, those stolen scraps of fun keep you going, even if Rome's always waiting to pull you back. You're 12 now, scampering through Rome's gritty streets, but for some kids your age, life's not just tough, it's a nightmare of chains and servitude. If you're one of the unlucky ones born or sold into slavery, your world's a far cry from the already rough life of a free kid. A mainstream historical fact: slavery was a cornerstone of Roman society, with children making up a significant portion of the enslaved population, often born to slave mothers or captured in wars. You're not just powerless like other kids, you're property, owned by someone who can do whatever they want with you. Your days are filled with endless work, no voice, and the constant fear of a whip or worse. Imagine you're a slave kid in a wealthy household. You're up before dawn, scrubbing floors, hauling firewood, or serving food to people who barely glance at you. Your tunic's ragged, your feet are bare, and your stomach's always half empty. Masters don't waste good food on slaves. You might be carrying trays of roasted dormice, yep, those creepy snacks from earlier, to a banquet, watching rich kids gobble treats you'll never taste. If you're in the city, you're dodging the chaos of the streets to run errands, maybe delivering a message or fetching water from a fountain that's more sludge than liquid. Rural slaves have it just as bad. You're toiling in fields, picking olives under a brutal sun, or cleaning stables filled with smells that make your eyes water. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some slave kids were trained as delici, pampered pets for rich Romans, dressed in fancy tunics and taught to sing or dance. Picture you, forced to perform silly tricks for a senator's guests, smiling through gritted teeth while they pinch your cheeks and call you cute. It sounds better than scrubbing pots, but it's humiliating, and you're still not free. You're a toy, not a person, and one wrong move could send you back to the kitchens or worse. Freedom's a dream you barely dare to have, because hoping hurts too much. Historians still argue whether slave children had any real chance at freedom or were doomed to lifelong servitude. Some say manumission, being freed, was possible, especially for skilled slaves. Others argue it was rare, and kids like you were stuck until death. Either way, you're not holding your breath. Your master's mood swings like a pendulum. One day he's tossing you a crust, the next is lashing you for spilling wine. You're learning to move quietly, to avoid eye contact, to blend into the walls. If you're in a harsh household, you've got scars from beatings, and you've seen other slave kids disappear, sold off or worse when they got too sick or too rebellious. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why don't slave kids play knucklebones? Because their masters keep all the bones. Back to your reality, your work never stops. If you're in a shop, you're sweeping sawdust or hauling heavy clay jars, your arms aching. In a rich villa, you're polishing silver or fanning a sweaty patrician while he naps. You're always on call, sleeping on a thin mat in a corner, woken by a shout to fetch something or clean a mess. You're not allowed to complain. Speaking out could mean a beating or being sent to the mines, where kids don't last long. You've heard the stories, and they keep you in line. If you're a girl, you might be stuck in the women's quarters, weaving or cleaning, always under the mistress's sharp eye. Boys might work outdoors or learn a trade, but it's no better. Your hands are blistered from tools, and you're too small for the heavy loads you're forced to carry. You're surrounded by other slaves, some your age, and you swap whispered stories about cruel masters or dreams of escape. But escape's a fantasy. Runaway slaves are hunted down, branded, or crucified. You're stuck, and the weight of that truth sits heavier than any load you carry. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the slave kid's day so long? Because even the sun didn't dare set on his chores. Seriously, though, you're not just fighting exhaustion, you're fighting despair. You see free kids in the streets, playing or whining about chores, and you envy their tiny scraps of freedom. You might sneak a moment to toss a pebble with another slave kid, but it's risky, get caught, and you're both in trouble. Your only friends are other slaves, and even they might snitch to curry favor with the master. Trust is as rare as a full meal. The worst part is the invisibility. You're not a person to your masters, you're a tool, like a broom or a mule. They don't care if you're tired, scared, or sick. You've seen slave kids collapse from fever, ignored until they're too weak to work, then replaced like broken pottery. If you're lucky enough to be in a kinder household, you might get a pat on the head or an extra scrap of bread, but it's not love, it's pity, and it stings. You're starting to wonder if you'll ever be more than a shadow in someone else's world. You're also dodging bigger dangers. Masters can punish you however they want: whippings, starvation, or worse. You've heard whispers of slave kids sold to brothels or forced to fight in the arena as practice for gladiators. You're tough, you have to be, but every day's a tightrope walk between obedience and survival. You clutch your bulla, if you're allowed to keep it, praying to gods you're not sure exist. Your life's not yours, and that truth cuts deeper than any whip. One last joke before we move on. Why did the slave kid whisper his dreams? Because even the walls reported to the master. As you curl up on your thin mat, the sounds of the household, clinking dishes, master's laughter, echoing around you, you're clinging to a tiny spark of hope. Maybe one day you'll be free, maybe you'll outsmart the system. But for now, you're just a slave kid in Rome, invisible, overworked, and dreaming of a life that feels impossibly far away. You're 12 or 13 now, still dodging Rome's chaotic streets, but the adults in your life are starting to look at you differently, like you're less a kid and more a bargaining chip for the future. If you're a girl, the pressure's especially intense, because in ancient Rome, marriage often came way too soon, sometimes as young as 12. A mainstream historical fact: Roman girls were frequently betrothed or married by their early teens, especially in elite families, to cement alliances or secure wealth. You're not dreaming of love or fairy tale weddings, you're being pushed into adult roles before you've even figured out who you are, and the weight of it feels like a millstone around your neck. If you're a girl, your mom's already teaching you to manage a household, spinning wool, balancing accounts, or ordering slaves around, even if your family's too poor to own any. You're practicing with a loom, your fingers sore from threading, while your mom drones on about pleasing your future husband. The guy's usually picked by your dad, and is often old enough to be your dad, too, some grizzled merchant or senator with bad breath and worse manners. You've heard whispers of girls married at 12, shipped off to live with strangers, expected to act like grown women overnight. You're trying not to think about it, but every time your parents huddle with a neighbor, you're wondering if they're planning your betrothal. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes used betrothal rings made of iron, not gold, to symbolize a binding contract, like you're a business deal, not a bride. Picture you, a nervous kid, with this clunky ring slipped onto your finger, your dad shaking hands with some guy who smells of wine and ambition. You're supposed to smile, but you're screaming inside, wishing you could run back to tossing knucklebones with your friends. Boys aren't off the hook either. If you're a boy, you might be spared marriage for now, but you're being groomed for adult roles, learning a trade, shadowing your dad in the forum, or training for military life. You're expected to grow up fast, too, and whining about it just gets you a lecture about Roman duty. Historians still argue whether early marriage harmed Roman girls more than it benefited families. Some say it strengthened social ties and ensured survival through alliances, Others argue it robbed girls of childhood, forcing them into roles they weren't ready for. Either way, you're feeling the squeeze. If you're a girl, your days are filled with lessons in wifely skills, like cooking porridge or stitching tunics, while your friends, boys, get to dream of glory in the army. You're not even allowed to complain. Your mom says it's your duty to honor the family, and your dad's already counting the dowry he'll get or give. You're a pawn in a game you didn't choose, and it's starting to sink in. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman girl dread her betrothal? Because her groom's toga was older than she was. Back to your reality. You're not just preparing for marriage, you're living in a world that expects you to act like an adult while treating you like a child. If you're a girl, you're stuck at home, practicing for a life you don't want yet. Your mom's showing you how to weave a stola, the dress of a married woman, and it feels like a costume for someone else. You're still sneaking moments to play with a rag doll, but even that's frowned upon. Kids your age are supposed to be mature. If you're a boy, you're trailing your dad, learning to barter or fight, but you're still under his thumb, with no real freedom. The worst part is the lack of choice. Your parents decide your future spouse, often based on politics or money, not love. You've seen girls carted off to husbands who ignore them or worse, and you're terrified that's your fate. If you're a boy, you might dodge marriage for now, but you're still pushed toward adult responsibilities, carrying weapons, managing accounts, or proving you're man enough for Rome. You're expected to nod and obey, but inside, you're raging. You want to run through the streets, not sit through betrothal talks or military drills. You're caught between childhood and a future you're not ready for. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids pick their spouses? Because their parents think love's just a bad deal. Seriously, though, you're starting to resent how little say you have. You overhear your parents haggling over dowries or alliances, and it's like you're livestock, not a person. If you're a girl, you're praying your husband's kind, but rumors of cruel men make you shiver. Boys face their own pressures, your dad's drilling you on manly virtues, and any sign of weakness earns you a scowl. You're supposed to be grateful for this honor, but it feels like a trap, and you're not sure how to escape. If you're a slave kid, marriage isn't even an option unless your master allows it, and even then, it's just another way to tie you to servitude. Your kids will be slaves, too. Free or slave, you're learning that growing up means losing what little freedom you had. You're still clutching that bulla amulet, hoping it'll protect you from a future that's closing in fast. You steal moments of defiance, whispering with friends about running away or mocking your future spouse's bad haircut, but they are fleeting. Rome's got plans for you, and they don't include your dreams. You're also seeing how unfair it all is. Your older brother gets to strut around, prepping for a glorious career, while you're stuck weaving or training for a life you didn't choose. Girls are married off to seal deals, boys are pushed into roles to uphold family pride. You're starting to question why the gods or your parents get to decide everything, but speaking up's not an option. Disobedience means a beating or worse. You're tough, but this pressure's heavier than any water jar you've carried. One last joke before we move on. Why was the Roman kid's betrothal so rushed? Because Rome needed another taxpayer fast. As you huddle on your straw mattress, the city's hum mixing with whispers of your future, you're clutching that bulla, wishing for a way out. Marriage or manhood's looming, and you're not ready, not for the ring, the responsibilities, or the life Rome's forcing on you. You're still a kid, but the city's already decided you're something else, and there's no turning back. You're 13 now, weaving through Rome's bustling streets, but there's a shadow hanging over you heavier than the city's usual smog: war. It's not just a story from some old poet, it's a real, looming threat that could snatch away your family, your home, or even you. A mainstream historical fact: ancient Rome was almost constantly at war, whether fighting barbarians on the frontiers or squashing civil uprisings, and kids like you weren't spared the ripple effects. You're not just dodging carts or chores anymore, you're living with the fear that your dad, brother, or maybe even you could be dragged into the chaos of battle, and the thought keeps you up at night, listening to the city's restless hum. If you're a boy, the pressure's intense. You're old enough to know that Roman men are expected to be soldiers, and your dad's already talking about honor and serving the empire. You've seen recruiting officers in the forum, signing up boys barely older than you, their faces pale but trying to look brave. If you're from a poor family, you might be conscripted soon, sent to march miles with a heavy pack and a sword you barely know how to swing. Wealthier kids aren't safe either. Your family might push you toward a military career to gain status, even if you'd rather hide in a market stall. Girls aren't off to war, but you're not free from worry. Your dad or brother could be drafted, leaving you and your mom to scrape by alone. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes sent kids to watch military drills or executions to toughen them up, believing it'd prepare you for war's realities. Picture you, dragged to a dusty field to see soldiers spar or a traitor meet a grim end, your stomach churning while your dad nods approvingly. You're supposed to feel inspired, but you're just hoping you don't faint. Wars everywhere, in the stories adults tell, the graffiti on walls, even the prayers at your family's shrine, asking Mass to protect Rome. You're clutching that bulla amulet, praying it protects you from a future with a sword in your hand. Historians still argue whether war's constant presence made Roman kids grow up faster or just left them traumatized. Some say it built resilience, preparing you for a tough world. Others think it stole any chance at a real childhood, filling your head with fear. Either way, you're feeling it. You've heard whispers of battles, Parthians in the east, Gauls in the north, and the news spreads like wildfire in the market. You're not sure where these places are, but you know men don't always come back. Your neighbor's son left last year, and now his mom weeps at the fountain. You're starting to wonder who's next. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman kid dread the forum? Too many recruiters looking for volunteers. Back to your reality, war's not just a distant threat, it's personal. If your dad's a soldier, he's gone for months, maybe years, and every letter feels like a gamble. If he's not fighting, he's stressed about taxes to fund the legions, which means less food for you. Civil wars are worse. Rome's torn itself apart before, with riots and purges right in the city. You've seen angry crowds in the streets, shouting about some new emperor or traitor, and you're learning to run when the mood turns ugly. If you're a girl, your role's different but no less heavy. You're helping your mom stockpile grain or sew clothes for soldiers, all while worrying about your brother or dad. You've heard stories of families losing everything when a war goes bad, homes burned, kids sold into slavery. You're praying to Juno for protection, but the fear's always there, like a knot in your gut. Boys face their own dread. You're training with wooden swords, mimicking soldiers, but it's not a game. One wrong move in a real fight, and you're done. You're not ready, but Rome doesn't care. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids play soldier? Because the real thing's way too scary. Seriously, though, you're surrounded by war's shadow. You see veterans in the streets, missing limbs or eyes, begging for bread. You overhear men at the bars talking about battles, their voices low and grim. If you're a slave kid, you might be forced to carry supplies for the army, trudging through mud with no hope of glory. Free or slave, you're learning that war's not just for soldiers, it's a thief, stealing dads, brothers, and peace of mind. The worst part is the waiting. Every rumor of a new campaign or rebellion makes your family tense. Your dad's muttering about conscription, your mom's burning extra offerings at the shrine, and you're just trying to stay out of the way. You're tough, you've survived Rome's streets, hunger, and chores, but this fear's different. It's not about dodging a cart or a beating, it's about losing everything. You're starting to hate the sound of trumpets or the sight of soldiers, because they mean trouble's coming, and you're too young to do anything but wait. You're finding small ways to cope. You whisper with friends about far-off battles, half scared, half fascinated. You might carve a tiny sword from a stick, playing at being a hero, but it feels hollow when you know the real cost. Your parents drag you to sacrifices, praying for victory, and you're tossing grain on the altar, hoping it's enough. But deep down, you're wondering if the gods care about kids like you, caught in a world where war's always one step away. One last joke before we move on. Why was the Roman kid bad at war games? His stick sword kept breaking on his dreams. As you curl up on your straw mattress, the city's noises, shouts, cartwheels, maybe a distant trumpet, filtering through the walls, you're clutching your bulla, praying war stays far away. You're just a kid, but Rome's already sizing you up for a soldier's life or a widow's grief. You're tough, but this fear's heavier than any load you've carried, and all you can do is hope tomorrow's quieter. You're 13, maybe 14 now, weaving through Rome's crowded streets, but today you're not just dodging carts or chores, you're being dragged to the Colosseum or a local amphitheater, where the air buzzes with cheers and the sharp tang of blood. Public spectacles, gladiator fights, beast hunts, even executions, are Rome's favorite entertainment, and kids like you aren't spared the front row view. A mainstream historical fact: the Colosseum, built in 80 CE, could hold up to 50,000 spectators, and Romans flocked to watch violent games that often included death, all in the name of glory and distraction. You're not here for fun, you're here because your dad thinks it'll make you brave, but the gore's making your stomach churn. You're perched on a stone bench, squished between sweaty strangers, the roar of the crowd deafening as a gladiator swings his sword or a lion tears into some poor prisoner. The sand's stained red, and you're trying not to stare, but it's impossible to look away. Your dad's cheering, your mom's covering her eyes, and you're just hoping you don't puke on your tunic. These shows aren't rare, they're a regular part of life, from massive events in the Colosseum to smaller fights in local arenas. If you're in the countryside, you might see traveling troops stage mock battles, but they're still brutal, and you're still expected to watch. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes gave kids tiny gladiator figurines as toys, so you might be clutching a clay mini warrior, reenacting the fights you just saw, even though the real thing gave you nightmares. Picture you, back in the alley, making your little gladiator fight a stick, but the memory of real blood makes your hands shake. These spectacles are supposed to teach you courage or Roman pride, but mostly they teach you that life's cheap, especially if you're a criminal, slave, or beast. You're starting to wonder why everyone's so excited about death. Historians still argue whether these violent spectacles desensitized kids like you or traumatized you for life. Some say they prepared you for Rome's harsh realities, like war or justice. Others think they left lasting scars, making violence seem normal. Either way, you're stuck in the middle. If you're a boy, your dad's pointing at the gladiator, saying, "That's how a real Roman fights." If you're a girl, you're expected to sit quietly, maybe learning to admire the heroic men, but you're mostly just glad you're not down there in the arena. Slave kids have it worst. You might be serving drinks to the crowd or cleaning up the mess afterward, dodging thrown bones and worse. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman kid hate the Colosseum? Too much raw, and not enough running away. Back to your reality, these spectacles aren't optional. Your family drags you along, maybe for a festival like the Ludi Romani, where days of games mean hours of watching men and animals die. The crowd's wild, shouting for blood, and you're trying to blend in, clapping when they clap, even if your heart's racing. You've seen gladiators win and become heroes, but you've also seen them lose, limp bodies dragged off by hooks. You're learning fast that Rome loves a winner, but losers don't get second chances. The danger's not just in watching. The Colosseum's packed, and fights break out in the stands, drunk men arguing over bets or throwing punches over a spilled drink. You're small, so you're dodging elbows and trying not to get trampled. If you're near the cheap seats, the ones high up for plebs like your family, the rickety benches creak, and you're half convinced they'll collapse. Outside, the streets are worse after a show. Pickpockets, drunks, and stray dogs make getting home a gamble. You're clutching your bulla, hoping it protects you from more than just evil spirits. Another joke to keep you cozy: why don't Roman kids bet on gladiators? Because they'd rather bet on surviving the crowd. Seriously, though, you're starting to hate these outings. The smells, blood, sweat, cheap wine, stick to you, and the cheers echo in your head long after you're home. If you're a slave kid, you're not even watching. You're hauling water or cleaning up the arena's grisly aftermath, trying not to slip in the mess. Free or slave, you're learning that violence is Rome's heartbeat, and you're expected to cheer for it, even if it makes you sick. The worst part is how normal it feels to everyone else. Your dad's talking about the gladiators' skill like it's a sport, while your friends swap stories about their favorite fighters. You're trying to act tough, nodding along, but the image of a lion tearing into a man keeps flashing in your mind. You're supposed to be proud of Rome's strength, but you're just scared of the arena, scared of growing up in a world where this is entertainment. You're starting to wonder if you're the only one who feels this way, but you're too smart to say it out loud. You steal moments to escape the weight of it all. Back in the alley, you might play fight with a stick, pretending you're a gladiator, but it's hollow. You know the real thing's no game. You're tougher now, hardened by Rome's streets and rules, but these spectacles are a reminder: life's brutal, and you're not as safe as you want to be. You're praying to the gods, tossing a pinch of grain at the family shrine, hoping you never end up on that bloody sand. One last joke before we move on: why was the Roman kid bad at cheering? His claps were drowned out by his shivers. As you huddle on your straw mattress, the distant roar of the Colosseum still ringing in your ears, you're clutching that clay gladiator figurine, wishing you could be a kid a little longer. Rome's spectacles are a lesson in power and pain, and you're learning it whether you want to or not. You're just hoping tomorrow's quieter, but in this city, quiet's as rare as mercy. You're still a kid in ancient Rome, maybe 14 now, tougher than you ever thought you'd be, but worn down by a city that's chewed you up and spit you out daily. You've dodged carts, hunger, disease, and the weight of a world that doesn't care about kids, yet somehow, you're finding scraps of joy in the cracks of this hard life. A mainstream historical fact: despite the harshness of Roman life, children found ways to carve out moments of happiness, whether through games, friendships, or small acts of defiance against the grind. You're not just surviving, you're stealing bits of hope, like a thief snatching figs in the market, and those moments keep you going. Picture you in a dusty alley, laughing with other kids as you toss knucklebones, the clatter of bones on stone drowning out the city's chaos for a fleeting second. It's not much, but it's yours, a rare moment where you're not fetching water, dodging a beating, or praying to gods who seem deaf. Maybe you're sharing a bruised peach with a friend, the sweet juice a tiny rebellion against the stale bread you're used to. Or you're sneaking a peek at a street performer juggling torches, your heart light for once, even if you know you'll be scolded for lingering. These joys are small, fragile, but they're what make you feel alive in a city that feels like it's trying to crush you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Roman kids sometimes made pet beetles, tying them to strings and watching them buzz in circles, like a cheap version of a chariot race. Imagine you, giggling as your beetle zips around, dodging your little brother's grabby hands. It's silly, but it's yours, and for a moment, you're not a cog in Rome's machine, you're just a kid with a bug on a string. These tiny escapes are your lifeline, whether it's telling ghost stories with friends or carving a stick into a pretend sword. You're learning to find light in the shadows, even if it's just a flicker. Historians still argue whether these moments of joy gave Roman kids real resilience or were just fleeting distractions from a brutal life. Some say they built character, teaching you to endure. Others think they were desperate gasps for air in a suffocating world. Either way, you're not thinking about that. You're too busy chasing those scraps of happiness. If you're a free kid, you might sneak off during Saturnalia to join the chaos, laughing as adults act like fools for once. If you're a slave, your joy's even harder one, maybe a stolen moment with another slave kid, whispering jokes about your master's bad haircut. Free or slave, you're grabbing every bit of fun you can, because Rome doesn't hand it out for free. Let's lighten things up with a joke. Why did the Roman kid love his beetle pet? It was the only thing that didn't boss him around. Back to you, these moments aren't just games, they're defiance. You're stealing time from chores, from fear, from the gods and grown-ups who rule your world. Maybe you're hiding in a market stall, swapping stories about a gladiator who supposedly fought a lion and won, your eyes wide with awe. Or you're daring a friend to splash in the Tiber, giggling as you both dodge the muck. These are your victories, small as they are, in a city that's always trying to break you. You're also finding joy in bonds. Your siblings, your allies in this tough world, sneak you an extra fig or cover for you when you're late. Your friends in the alley, scrappy like you, share a laugh or a game, and for a moment, you're not alone. Even the stray dogs you toss scraps to feel like friends, their wagging tails a rare bit of loyalty in a city that's anything but. You're learning that happiness isn't given, it's taken, snatched in quick, quiet moments before Rome pulls you back to reality. Another joke to keep you cozy: why was the Roman kid smile so sneaky? He'd just stolen a moment from his chores. Seriously, though, these joys come with a cost. You're always on edge, knowing a shout from your mom or a glare from your master could end your fun. If you're caught slacking, it's a smack or worse. But you're getting good at this, finding the gaps, the hidden corners where you can be a kid. You're tougher now, not just from surviving Rome's streets but from learning to carve out your own space, however small. The worst part is how fleeting it all is. Your beetle breaks its string, your game gets interrupted, your friend moves away or falls sick. Rome's a city that doesn't let joy last, but you're stubborn. You keep chasing it, whether it's a laugh, a stolen fruit, or a moment of pretending you're a hero, not a kid under someone's thumb. You're clutching that bulla, maybe even that beetle on a string, and you're holding tight to the belief that there's more to life than this grind. Wind down. As you lie on your straw mattress, the city's hum softening to a distant murmur, you let the day's small victories settle over you like a warm blanket. The laughter from that knucklebones game, the taste of that stolen fig, the buzz of your beetle circling its string, they're tiny sparks, but they glow in the dark of Rome's hard world. You're tougher than you were, braver than you knew, and those moments of joy, however brief, remind you that you're still here, still fighting. The streets outside are quieting, the shouts and cartwheels fading, and you can almost hear the Tiber lapping gently against its banks. Your bulla rests against your chest, a small weight, a quiet promise. Tomorrow will bring more struggles, chores, hunger, fear. But for now, you're drifting, carried by the memory of a smile, a game, a fleeting taste of freedom. Sleep comes softly, wrapping you in its gentle arms, whispering that you're stronger than Rome knows. Sweet dreams, little fighter, until the sun calls you back.